Hello and welcome. I'm Devika Devan and you're watching News X World. Let's take a look at our top stories this hour. German Foreign Minister Vadeful has targeted Moscow after massive drone attacks on Poland. He has stated that the drone incursion into Poland, Russia has now accepted an escalation. Meanwhile, Kremlin claims the drones were launched by Ukraine and not by Russia. As Sébastien Lecornu takes office as the new French Prime Minister, sprawling anti-government protests continue. The clashes come as part of the Block Everything movement. Over 200 protesters have been arrested so far. After an airstrike targeted Hamas leaders in Qatar, Israel's ambassador to the US warns that if the leaders weren't killed this time, Israel will succeed next time. The strike has sparked fears it could derail ceasefire talks in Gaza, where Qatar plays a major role in mediation. UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed arrives in Qatar in a show of solidarity after Israel's airstrike in Doha. Meanwhile, Qatar says it has the right to respond to the strikes and has denounced it as a blatant attack. The International Atomic Energy Agency and Iran have reached a major breakthrough agreement to resume nuclear cooperation. This comes amid mounting pressure from Western powers threatening sanctions on Iran and after months of halted access to Iran's nuclear facilities. President Donald Trump says his administration is negotiating to remove trade barriers with India and will speak to Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the coming weeks. Trump strikes a more optimistic tone, expressing hope the two sides can finalize a deal after weeks of friction. Amid the nationwide curfew in Nepal, its former Chief Justice Sushila Karki is likely to be appointed as the interim Prime Minister. Former PM KP Oli resigned from the post yesterday after protests took a violent turn. And we begin with some breaking news coming in at the top of the hour. Russia's defense ministry has issued a statement following reports of drones entering Polish airspace. The ministry said its forces launched a strike on military facilities in western Ukraine and confirmed all targets were successfully hit. It stressed that no strikes were planned against Polish territory. Officials have also claimed the drones used in the attack have a maximum range of 700 kilometers, arguing this makes their presence in Poland impossible. Despite that denial, the ministry added that Moscow is ready to hold consultations with Poland's defense ministry to discuss the issue and address any concerns over the incident. That was an important development because Poland and its NATO allies are on high alert after a wave of drones breached Polish airspace overnight. Multiple Russian drones violated Polish airspace in what authorities are calling the most serious incursion since the start of the Ukraine war. Polish Deputy Prime Minister has called it a planned action and warned of a disinformation campaign by Moscow and Minsk. Reactions are continuing to pour in following the drone incursion. German Foreign Minister Johann Vadeful has said Russia is not ready for diplomacy and has accepted an escalation with this incident. He added that Berlin will give a strong response. Germany's defense minister has confirmed Germany supports Poland's decision to invoke NATO's Article 4. Meanwhile, German Foreign Minister stressed that the drone violation shows the seriousness of the threat and highlighted the need for NATO defense systems. The European Union is also voicing strong concerns, with Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas warning that President Putin is trying to test Western unity, pushing the limits because past responses have not been strong enough. She stressed that the message from Moscow is clear: Europe's unity and resolve are being put to the test. Mr. John Rossomando joins us on the broadcast from the USA. Mr. Rossomando, interesting developments have taken place in the past 24 hours. What we are learning is that Russia's defense ministry has now issued a statement following reports of the drone incursion into Polish airspace. The ministry has said its forces launched a strike on military facilities in western Ukraine and has confirmed that all targets were hit. But at the same time, they said that this attack was in a maximum range of 700 kilometers, saying that the possibility of drones in Poland is impossible. Firstly, what do you make of this first formal communication coming out of Russia?
Well, I think the Russians are trying to bring down the temperature in the room to prevent NATO from escalating further. I think that the truth, if you follow what NATO is saying, is that the Russians were probing NATO defenses in Poland to see what sort of response. And of course, the Russians will not admit to that.
Mr. Rossomando, at the same time, Russia is saying that it's ready to hold talks with Poland to clear the air on this matter. Does that indicate that somewhere Russia is was possibly maybe testing waters and now they're ready to perhaps clear the air?
Well, I think that the Russians, don't want this to escalate. They know that they can't handle, direct Polish or NATO involvement in Ukraine, which is why they've been trying to keep Ukraine from joining NATO in the first place. So I think that they're trying to cool things down.
All right, but at the same time, when you say that they're trying to cool things down, the fact that Poland has now invoked Article 4 of the NATO alliance and Germany has now come out in support, what do you make of some of the developments taking place on that front when Poland comes and says that this is possibly the most serious threat to European countries since the end of the Second World War?
Well, I think that definitely the Russians are pushing the limits here. I mean, you've had different statements coming out from Moscow about threats about European involvement in Ukraine. You've had prior incursions by drones into Polish territory through conflict. So I think that the Europeans are on edge and that the Russians really need to dial things down because this is the way wars start.
Yes, but that's the big question then at this point in time. When you say that the Russians need to really make an effort at this point in time, how exactly will they achieve that?
Well, A, diplomatically, and B, to avoid targets in Ukraine near the Polish border.
Okay, all right. Mr. Rossomando, stay on with us as we have more news coming in. In eastern Ukraine, at least one civilian was wounded and a residential house was damaged after it was struck by Ukrainian weaponry in Donetsk. According to Denis Pushilin, who is the Russian-appointed head of the region, the residents had to be evacuated through windows after a staircase inside the building was destroyed. So far, there has been no reaction from Kyiv. Donetsk, which has been under pro-Russian control since 2014 and was formally annexed by Moscow in 2022 in a move condemned as illegal by most UN member states, has seen repeated shellings over the years with civilian casualties reported. Russia currently controls nearly 3/4 of the Donetsk region, along with most of Luhansk and parts of Zaporizhia and Crimea as well. Let's listen into what the residents had to say.
Сидела в кресле, вспышка и взрыв. Все. Вот это, что я помню.
Mr. John Rossomando joins us on the broadcast. Mr. Rossomando, I have to understand from you, what do you make of the current situation as far as Russia and Ukraine are concerned and the continuing attacks by both sides? Where does that really take us as far as talks are concerned?
Well, I think the talks are really in a stalemate because neither side wants to give. And the Ukrainians don't want to concede the territory occupied by Russia. And the Russians want to get as much on the ground as they can to get the upper hand in the peace talks.
Right. Mr. Rasamana, thank you so much for joining us on NewsX World. In other news, France's new Prime Minister, Sébastien Lecornu, has called for policy changes in political creativity as he officially took oath on Wednesday amid mounting unrest across the country. Speaking at the handover ceremony in Paris, Lecornu, the fifth Prime Minister under President Emmanuel Macron in less than 2 years, said his government must be ready to change not just in form or method, but in substance. Listen in.
Il va falloir aussi changer, être sûrement plus créatif, parfois plus technique, plus sérieux dans la manière de travailler avec nos oppositions. J'aurai l'occasion d'y revenir, on vient d'en parler très longuement tous les deux. Mais je le dis aussi, il va falloir des ruptures. Et pas que sur la forme, et pas que dans la méthode, des ruptures aussi sur le fond.
Lecornu's appointment comes during the height of the nationwide Block Everything protests, which have sparked widespread disruption and nearly 200 arrests. Among the unrest, a bus was set on fire in Rennes, though authorities have confirmed it was empty when protesters blocked it. Reuters has verified the incident through video and satellite imagery, with French media reporting on the aftermath. Moving on, China's defense minister says China is opposing infringement and provocation by certain countries, including deliberate instigation by countries outside the South China Sea. He warns against any violations and urges respect for each nation's core interests. China remains committed to maintaining peace and stability in the region and calls for equal, peaceful and stable military ties amongst all countries operating in the South China Sea. During talks with U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Dong has stressed that efforts to contain, deter or interfere with China will be futile, underscoring the need for a respectful and cooperative China-U.S. relationship. In other news, heavy smoke rises over western Gaza City after Israel brought down a residential tower, the latest high-rise to be targeted in its escalating offense on Gaza. The building, known as the Tiba 2 Tower, had been evacuated earlier after Israel's military spokesman Avichai Adre issued a warning to residents in and around the area. Hours later, the military confirmed it had struck the high-rise, saying the structure was being used by Hamas for operational purposes. The destruction adds to the growing number of residential and commercial towers reduced to rubble in Gaza, deepening the humanitarian crisis as fighting intensifies across densely populated neighborhoods. Mr. Mark Sofer, former ambassador of Israel to India, with us on the broadcast. Mr. Sofer, I have to, of course, understand from you, as Israel continues its offensive against Gaza, it seems as though the city is at this point in time truly crumbling and there is a genuine humanitarian crisis. How exactly should the international community now respond or offer support to, in a way, create an atmosphere where at least humanitarian aid can be supplied?
Well, I don't know how much the current situation in Gaza is contributing to a pretty terrible humanitarian situation anyway there. I think the problem that we're facing in Israel, especially the Israeli population, is that we seem to feel, over 70% of Israelis actually, that the government doesn't have really an exit strategy how to get out of this war. What we need immediately is the release of hostages and of all the hostages, and a negotiation to get out and finish this once and for all. And we don't seem to feel that's coming from the Israeli government right now. And of course, let's not forget that we're not talking about a civilized country like India or Europe, but we are facing Hamas, a terrorist organization which has been responsible for murder, rape and pillage and doesn't have any thought at all for its own population. And so we're facing this terrible situation now of a government which in Israel, which doesn't seem to know how to extricate itself, an Israeli population of which 80% of it wants there to be an end to the war, and on the other side a Hamas which is just bent solely on death and destruction, which it always has been. So it's a very, very difficult situation. And I think the ball lies to a large extent in the hands of President Trump. I think he has put forward a proposal which seems to be a very good proposal for the release of all the hostages and the bringing an end to the hostilities. But I don't know how it's advancing at this particular stage. It doesn't seem to be doing so.
Okay, but Ambassador Sofa, I have to understand from you. When you say, when you talk about an exit plan and say that it has to end once and for all, what does that truly entail at this point in time? Because what we're understanding from the Israeli government is that they want to put an end to Hamas. But what does that truly mean? Does that mean surrender of arms at this point in time? Or does that mean neutralization of every last Hamas terrorist?
Unfortunately, you can't bring an end to the Hamas. I think perhaps I'll start by saying that those who are in favor of the current Israeli government, or those like myself which are actually opposed to it, we all are in a consensus that the Hamas must have no future in the entire Gaza area, not just in the city of Gaza, both militarily and politically. However, in order for that to happen, there has to be an alternative to get to Hamas rule, number one, and it has to be decimated as much as possible, number two. Well, I think the second part already is pretty much the case. Hamas doesn't really exist as a serious fighting force anymore, but what is needed now is some sort of alternative which will keep it out of power completely, and eventually, sooner rather than later, a complete disarmament of Hamas. President Trump has put on the table a roadmap exactly for that. And that's what needs to happen right now. And I think that his ultimatum was that either it happens or it's the end of everything. I think is a very strong one, and I think has to be brought to fruition. And let's hope it does. It's crucial that the war ends. Nobody really knows where we're heading. And I don't think that Hamas, as a terrorist organization, what it is, rather like Lashkar Tiba, if you will, can be defeated solely by military means. There has to be a military component and a strong military component, but there has to be some sort of political future, some sort of alternative rule there, which hasn't been brought to the table here in Israel, and it needs to be more forwarded by both the United States and by much of the Arab world.
Ambassador Sofa, is there also a worry that Israel could, if the war continues the way it is right now, continue to lose support as far as European nations or its neighbors in Europe are concerned?
Well, yes. Well, I must say there's quite a bit of hypocrisy in Europe as far as Israel is concerned. And even those, as I say, like myself, who are against the government, seem it's very strange to look at some of the condemnation of what happened in Qatar, for example, yesterday, not long after the the Americans bombed, got rid of bin Laden in Pakistan, or the French intervened in Mali, etc., in order to get rid of the extremists there. We're talking about a war, and I think that in Israel, everybody is in favor of the elimination of the Hamas leadership. However, it must be done, yes, in partnership with our European friends, not just in Europe, I would say Western, and not even Western, even around the world, the civilized nations, including, perhaps especially, with the forward-looking countries in the Arab world. And I don't see that happening. I don't see the Israeli government at this stage entertaining any type of serious discussion, except for with the United States. And even there, it seems to be floundering. So obviously, as long as this war drags on, the support for Israel will be harmed, and I think that that's something which is negative, dangerous even, for Israel in the long run. I do, however, feel that not all of it is coming from anti-Semitism. Far from it, although anti-Semitism exists, and in no small fashion. And B, I think that it won't be long after the war is over and after this current government is no longer with us in Israel. It'll be a very short period of time until things are back on track between Israel and the international community.
Ambassador Sofa, stay on with us as we shift our focus to some more news that's coming in. Iran has announced a new agreement with the UN nuclear watchdog, but the deal does not guarantee full inspector access to nuclear sites. Officials in Tehran say access remains limited to the Bushehr facility for now. The agreement was signed in Cairo. It is being seen as a step towards a new diplomatic framework. However, Tehran warned the deal could collapse if international sanctions are reimposed. The IAEA says the document provides clear procedures for inspections and reporting. Let's have a look at what the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi had to say.
بر اساس این توافق باید تاکید بکنم که هیچ دسترسی به بازرسان آژانس الان داده نمیشه مگر با موردی که بحث دیدگاه بوشهر که به خاطر تعویض سوختش ما بنا به مصوبه شورای عالی امنیت ملی دسترسی داده شده بود و الان هم جریان داره. اما نفس این توافق هیچ دسترسی رو ایجاد نمیکنه. این توافق که الان به دست اومده، سندی که امضا شد بین ما، مهمترین مشخصش این هست که به رسمیت میشناسه که یک شرایط جدیدی به وجود آمده و همکاری ایران با آژانس مثل سابق نیست و باید در شکل و فرم جدیدی.
All right, Mr. Mark Sofa, former ambassador of Israel to India, with us on the broadcast. Ambassador Sofa, I have to understand from you, in your reading of the entire situation, where do you think are we heading as far as the future of Iran's nuclear program and an international watchdog keeping its eyes on it are concerned?
Well, I think every time I appear in international media, and I say this again to you quite openly, first point must be we need to make a distinction between the Iranian people, which are very forward-looking, erudite, which the large part, of course, don't subscribe whatsoever to the regime that's running them. To make a distinction between them and the regime itself, which is a throwback to the Middle Ages, a medieval religious cult, if it will, which is bent on instability, murder, mayhem, and that's what you see wherever Iran is. I think one of the problems that the international community faces when it talks about Iran is that it doesn't understand always, until the very end, that this particular regime is really quite adept at negotiation and will sell you, or sell us, sell the world, the same merchandise 3 or 4 times. So yes, they will meet the inspectors, they will allow them in, then you hear nothing, then they won't allow them in, then they will say, oh yes, but we will. They'll sell this inspection 2, 3, 4 times. And at some stage, earlier rather than later, the international community must say, okay, enough is enough, you haven't done it, you've promised to do it, you've backtracked, you've hummed, you've hard, you haven't made any movement forward. The sanctions are snapping back in. And that really hasn't happened to any large extent because nobody really wants it to happen, but I think it must. Because without that, Iran will not move forward. They don't want to have the supervision. They don't want to have, they want to have nuclear, I believe, nuclear weaponry. They see themselves in that domain. And unless it's stopped and stopped dead in its tracks, they will move forward, 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards, 3 steps sideways, and sell you the same and same and same again and again. And that's what they are adept at, and that is what must be stopped by the international community.
Well, Ambassador Sofa, thank you so much for joining us in NewsX World with that perspective. And that's all that we have time for. We will continue to bring you more updates from around the world on the other side. Stay tuned.